My name is Brad Minard, and I'm going to be moderating this, and so hopefully we don't have to do a lot of the, hopefully we're going to be respectful and listen to him. Town halls are a time-honored way for our government officials to keep in touch with the needs of the constituents back home. Town halls are a cornerstone of democracy, and in keeping with this tradition, the goal of tonight's event is to have a respectful and meaningful exchange of ideas. Therefore, we kindly ask the members that you guys abide by these following guidelines. Please keep your questions concise and to the point so that Representative Davidson can get to as many questions as possible in the limited time we have. Please do not interrupt, shout, or talk over others. We will get the most out of this evening if everyone keeps the dialogue respectful. Feel free to show your approval with the green cards that were passed out or your disapproval with the red cards that are passed out. Our goal is to protect everyone's First Amendment free speech rights. However, anyone who is extremely disruptive, using profanity, or acting in a threatening manner will be asked to leave immediately. Before leaving, we just ask that you make sure you pick up around your area, leave the hall better than we got it. I do want to thank the Clark County Sheriffs for being here and thank them for their service. We also have State Representative Kyle Kaler in the audience. And now it's my honor to kind of introduce Representative Davidson. Warren Davidson was born and raised in Ohio. After high school, he enlisted in the Army where he proudly served for 12 years. Warren is a graduate of West Point. In 2000, Warren returned to Ohio to keep with his father's manufacturing business. As he continued to reshape the family business, Warren started another business and earned an MBA from the University of Notre Dame. Warren won a special election in June of 2016 to fill the remainder of the term of outgoing Representative John Boehner. He was reelected into his first full term in Congress in November of the same year. In Congress, Warren Davidson serves on the Financial Services Committee, which is focused on policies that promote economic growth. Warren recently celebrated 21 years of marriage with his wife Lisa, who's also in the audience, and they are the proud parents of 2 children, Zachary and Rachel. If you'll please join me in welcoming Representative Davidson.
Yeah, I don't think we'll need that. Hey, thanks for coming out tonight. It's absolutely gorgeous outside, so you got to be pretty committed to politics to come hang out in a hall, even as nice a place as this, on a night like this, very early in spring. So thanks for everybody for hosting. Thanks for coming out tonight, and I look forward to your questions. People said, I actually talked with some of the news folks that parked outside. They said, well, why do you do these things? And fundamentally, I think one of the most important reasons to do them is people have questions, and you hear a lot about your member of Congress. Sometimes you don't hear as much about the member of Congress as you want. Sometimes you hear more than you want. But it's hard to get to know somebody. And one of the best ways to get to know somebody is to have your question answered. So I hope I get to answer your question. I am a little constrained on time, more than I would like, but I really appreciate the groups for reaching out and scheduling meetings. And so don't look at this as a one-time event. I'm looking to be active throughout the community all the time. So we have 6 counties that we're covering and try to get to them in proportion to their population, roughly. So that's the challenge. And then in this year, the legislative days are more. We're actually technically in session more than we're in Ohio. And that's good or bad. Fundamentally, we got to get things done there. And depending on what you want done, that's where that happens, a lot of it. But a big part of what you want done comes from the dialogue and just activity in the district. So what have we been up to? Well, we've done well over 100 events now. On average, when I'm not in session, 4 to 7 events a day. And then I've been in session 50 plus days. And then we've had little sessions, planning sessions, where committee work, I'm on financial services, or conference work where Republicans gather and plan our strategy just like Democrats go and plan their strategy. So that's been the bulk of the year. But when I got in the job, a couple things about it. So I read a little bit about my background, and one of the big things is I got to actually see the wall come down. Not literally that day, not 9 November 1989, but I was stationed in Germany back in 1989. So truly one of the highlights for me in life is seeing people their first hours coming across that border. And they couldn't experience this kind of process. So you look at that. I mean, I joined the Army back when Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Well, Gorbachev didn't tear down the wall. Frankly, we didn't tear it down. We didn't inspire a coup or anything else. There was no big shooting war. It was a protracted war of ideas. And we shared our ideas, and the truth got past the Iron Curtain. And once the people on the other side of that curtain heard what they were missing out on, they wanted to be part of it. So true dialogue existed. Not like we didn't feel like we might be at the brink of war. Generally, people on the left thought Reagan was going to start World War III. He didn't. But his brinkmanship did usher in the end of the Cold War. So I look at what can be accomplished with ideas. Well, we saw the fruit of the ideas on the other side of the Iron Curtain. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, the fruit of our ideas, our way of life, on this side of the Iron Curtain. I met people their first hours, that was Thanksgiving of 1989, on this side of the border, and they said, "Is it like this everywhere?" And I said, "Well, this is Berlin. I'm a little kid from Ohio, by far the biggest city I've been in." I'm like, "Well, no, this is a huge city, And they're like, "Yeah, I got that." No, I mean, I can go to the store at night, and there's fresh food in the stores. There's fresh milk even. I'm like, "Well, yeah, 7-Eleven. We got that all over little small towns." Just things that they couldn't relate to. They had the things that markets produce, which is options. Shelves that are stocked, not because a central planner decided to stock them, or somebody told the dairy guy to go milk and take his milk to market, but because the market worked. And so the ideas that I saw tried behind that wall, the fruits of that were not what people wanted. They had to have walls to hold people in. The fruits of what we had are what people wanted, and they've embraced. And so it's been an honor to be able to go from that enlisted soldier to go to West Point, where I thought I would be a career Army officer, to get out, largely because of some of the things we're still seeing play out in foreign policy today. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but fundamentally, why did I get out of the Army? Well, you got John Kerry on one end, and you got John McCain on the other. I think they're both a little off. I think there's a better path to go down, and I felt like those are the two sides politically that were going to win. Unfortunately, that's been accurate. In my opinion, it's unfortunate, and the fruits of that are unfortunate. We have not had great success with our post-Cold War diplomacy, and we're still dealing with the consequences of that. And so I decided to get out where I'd be less affected by that. I spent the past 16 years building manufacturing companies right here in Ohio, and it's been an interesting time to do that. So when I decided to jump in, I jumped in. We literally filed 10 minutes before the filing deadline. Not really the plan to go be the elected representative when John Boehner resigned. But as you looked at the field, a couple big drivers. We still don't have a national strategy. We don't have a real grand strategy that unifies our country after the Cold War ended. And we're still, as a country, on a path to bankrupting our country. I mean, deficits do matter. And, math is a real science. Those numbers are real. And we are on a path to bankrupting our country. And so that is something that is going to take big thinking, and it's going to take problem solving. And I see a lot of people more focused on blaming and rhetoric and frankly denying the fact that these are real challenges. And I felt like perhaps I would have an opportunity to weigh in. I'm humbled to be there and serve. So for you that voted for me to give me that opportunity, thank you. For those that you didn't, hopefully you understand more about positions that I've taken and why I have them. So with that, I don't want to take up any more time. I hope to answer as many questions as possible. So look forward to your questions.
Okay, so I forgot to tell this when we first started. There is water back in the black tub back there, so if you guys want to grab one, feel free. If you want to ask a question, please try to line up around the sides of the room so you guys can go to the mics and then ask your question to the mic. If the congressman doesn't get to answer your question, there are papers in the back that you can write your questions down on, and we will give those to his staff, hopefully for him to be able to answer. So we'll go ahead and start on this side of the room, and here we go.
You are first in line. During World War II, the American government turned away Jewish refugees that ultimately lost their lives in Nazi concentration camps. Syrian men, women, and children continue to die every day as their civil war continues on. Our allies have agreed to take in hundreds of thousands of refugees, but you have said that you would not support allowing any Syrian refugees into our country. Do you believe that our government made the right decision when Jews were turned away in World War II? And how do you reconcile that black mark in our history with your current position on Syrian refugees?
No, we didn't get it right with respect to the Jews, and no, we didn't get it right with respect to the Syrians. So fundamentally, what I've supported is a risk assessment. So when, for example, on immigration, the best thing for refugees is what we did do in World War II. You put an end to the people causing them to be refugees, which I support, defeating ISIS. These people are refugees because ISIS is killing them. Some of them are refugees for different reasons, but there's refugees from all over the world for different reasons. So I do support defeating ISIS. Now, when you say, hey, come to America, we're a welcoming place. Immigration is great when it's done legally. So when people seek asylum, they seek it before they leave the country they're in, not after they've arrived illegally. So in the case of Syrian refugees, the easiest thing to do would be to help them close to home. We already spend billions of dollars in foreign aid for countries like Jordan, Kuwait, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and others. And so frankly, this is easier and less expensive and culturally easier to integrate for people to just stay close to home. So first, it'd be nice if they could stay in their homes because we stop the people that are oppressing them. And second, it'd be great if they could stay close to home because it's easier for them and frankly easier for us. And I'd say the other part is there are people that, like Saudi Arabia, who've taken 0 refugees. So if it's that big of a crisis and these are their kindred folks, they're not extending a hand to them. That doesn't mean we shouldn't act. But then when we do act, when you say, gee, we've helped these guys like in Iraq. This guy was my translator, for example, and he was with units helping put his life on the line and his family's life on the line for the past 2 years, leaving straight from combat with Army special operators, and now wants to come back to the United States. Well, he's a very different risk profile than a guy who just showed up because there's a battle in Raqqa. Now he shows up with his 4 brothers, they're all in their 20s, and their uncle, and they're just here to help and seek opportunity. This requires a different type of risk assessment. So that's what's behind the executive order, and that's something I support. But I think we should help them closer to home, and I don't think there's a big need to help them here.
But don't you think we could do more in general?
We could do more on anything if you just say, but do more, but do more. I could say that for everything. Who's that? Phillips, Michael Phillips, that won gold medal. He won 8. Well, dang, he could have won 9. I mean, we've done more to help the world than anybody. There's no country that's done more to help the world than the United States of America. And there's no idea that's done more harm than Marxism and this terror that's coming across from ISIS. It's been highly consequential, so I think we should defeat that, and that's going to do more good than sending over suitcases.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for being here today. I actually was at your last council, and this is not my question, but when Mary Ellen said it was a private event, I left, and I was walking out, this gentleman with a red hat pushed me. So I called Ryan Beckman at the Westchester office and sent her a video and sent her pictures, and I was expecting somebody from your office to reach back to me and maybe, apologize for me being pushed. My back was sore for a couple of days. I'm an immigrant, and sometimes people tell me don't speak Spanish or go back home, but it's the first time somebody ever actually pushes me. So anyways, that was my comment. I'm a tough cookie, so I'm back today. don't have any comments on that. I'm just gonna say that I was pushed at the last town hall, and I was expecting something to reach back.
Well, I hope the guy that pushed you apologizes to you.
Okay. Yeah. I don't.
If you want to press charges, I think you should do that. Our office didn't push you. We didn't host the event, just like we didn't host the one tonight.
Okay. So anyways, my actual question is that I have heard that you're very proud of your Christian heritage, and I'm also Christian, and it goes in line with the question before. I am puzzled by your unwillingness to welcome here into the country refugees, immigrants, and asylum seekers. We just had the case of Maribel Trujillo. She's already a U.S. citizen. She's been living with us, not on paper. She's not a U.S. citizen, but she's been working hard. She has family members that are U.S. citizens, the Catholic Archdiocese, hundreds of faith leaders and congregations, Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, have been rallying for her, praying for her, and you seem to be unwilling to welcome them. And Governor Kasich said it well, because him and Senator Portman have been trying to help, and Kasich said, what are we doing right now? We have a lot of broken families in the U.S.
Do you have a question? I mean, I appreciate what you're talking about, but a lot of people want to have questions answered.
Yes.
Do you have a question?
I do have a question. So I've been going to all your mobile hours for the last couple of months, your teletown hall and the one in Troy. So I appreciate that you listen to me right now, okay? So my question is, why are you so willing to help if you're a Christian? And then why do you want to get rid of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that grants birthright citizenship and equal rights for all babies born in the U.S.?
Okay, that's a couple questions. So one, I don't want to get rid of the 14th Amendment. I love the 14th Amendment. I think it's a great one. I think it needs to be correctly applied. And here's an example. So William and Kate, British royalty, William and Kate, right? You know what I'm talking about? Future King of England someday. They had their cute little babies, right? What were their names? George and Charlotte. Yeah. So people followed this, closely. And if William and Kate had gotten to the United States to have their babies, well, their babies aren't Americans because they were born in America. Their babies are future heirs to the British throne. They're not. They're future British royalty, all right? They're not Americans. Now, that's not the way the 14th Amendment's been applied. That's not what our current law says, but that's what I believe our law should be, and I think that's what I support. So when you say I support getting rid of the 14th Amendment, I support using the 14th Amendment to apply law to the states. I think the 14th Amendment's great. The only part of the 14th Amendment that I disagree with is an application of the law by the courts. But it is not stated that way in law in the actual amendment.
So the way I see it, the way I saw the 14th Amendment is that it started after a very bloody civil war, and it just gave equal rights to everybody. So even if you were a slave and you came here to the U.S. as a slave, your children, regardless of heritage and ancestry, would be protected by equal rights. And I think that's one of the greatest things we have in our country.
Thanks for your perspective. It's not a debate, but now you know my position. Thank you.
And then the second part of my question is, well, no, I guess, well, I just want to make sure, you did not answer my question, okay? Because I'm really puzzled as an immigrant myself, why you're so willing to help immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. And as a person of faith, I can't see that happening.
I would like to speak to the health care bill that may be coming up shortly. Because I know that two of the goals are to reduce the expenses. We're getting feedback because of this speaker being here. I don't know whether it can move it out of the way or not. Nope.
We can hear you.
We can hear you. There you go.
That should help. Okay. Two of the goals are to reduce the cost of health care. And the second is to make health care available to as many people as possible. What I am not getting my head around are what are they referring to as the health care savings accounts? Because I can't see how anyone can put money in a savings account that would cover the costs of things like cancer treatment or open heart surgery. I just don't know how a health savings account is going to work.
Yeah, thanks for your question. That's a good one. So fundamentally, what is a health savings account? So health savings accounts already exist, and what they are is sort of like an IRA. So if you have retirement savings, you put the money away, and you can put it away before taxes. So it doesn't get taxed. And for an individual, I think the number it's around $6,000 right now. So if you have a high deductible insurance plan, then, so a lot of people under the Affordable Care Act got more coverage. They got insurance. They got subsidies to buy insurance off of the Obamacare exchanges. But some of these insurance benefits come with high deductible plans that you have to pay for the first $10,000, $6,000 to $10,000 on average in our region on the HSAs. So if you're paying a premium, you think, oh, okay, well now I can go to the doctor and I'm covered. Well, you're covered, but then you have to pay the first $6,000 out of pocket. Well, that's a lot. For an individual, sometimes it caps off at $1,500. For a family, it might be $6,000. But you can put this money away out of your savings and put it away. And you say, well, that's great for families that can afford to put it away. What about the people that can't? And under the Republican plan, there's a means-tested, refundable tax credit that works sort of like the earned income tax credit, where it's redistributive. So even if you don't have enough money, you would get money that would go into this HSA, and then you would direct it towards the insurance premium so that you can help make insurance more affordable. So that's how it's designed to work, and help with the fact that under the Affordable Care Act, a lot of people found that they had, quote, coverage, but they were unable to really access it because they had this high out-of-pocket expense. But you're right, one of the big goals is cost, and fundamentally one of the big problems that the bill ran into is that it shifted how a lot of the payments worked from Medicaid expansion dollars to these refundable tax credits for HSAs. That benefit is less generous. It's a defined cost instead of an unlimited amount of coverage. That puts it on better financial footing. So when you go back to our country's on a path to bankrupting itself in the name of compassion, and then it's not going to be compassionate when we go bankrupt, folks. So it's a more sound financial plan, but it is going to create challenges. That can only be met by work, which is the best solution to poverty. But that's how it's there and why it works. And fundamentally, the lack of ability to address cost is where some of the dialogue broke down. So thanks. Next question.
Hi, Mr. Davidson. I'm Larry Brown from Tip City. As a fellow Christian, I would be interested to learn how you reconcile your Christian principles with the environmental rollback regulations, rollbacks, the proliferation of guns, which it seems like the Second Amendment caucus, which you're a part of, supports, and how you can easily support a president whose policies and actions are the antithesis of what the gospel teaches.
Yeah, so thanks. So faith is a guide, and I would say, look, my oath of office was to support and defend the Constitution, which fundamentally recognizes our faith. So when you look back at our founding documents, one of the unique things about our Constitution goes back to our Declaration of Independence. So you look at our Declaration of Independence, it says we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So these are inalienable. They're not rights that were given to us by the government. They're not rights that therefore can be taken from us by government. So Benjamin Franklin, who actually was present for the Declaration and the Constitution, he stated that the Constitution does not guarantee happiness, only the pursuit of it. You have to catch happiness yourself. How do you do that? Well, you don't do that because the government can give you a little bit more, because then you'll want a little bit more, and then a little bit more. Frankly, the people that have advocated the government as the giver of rights are different than the United States. In the United States, we recognize that our rights came from, we were endowed with them by a creator. So then when you say, all right, how does this relate to what we're talking about today? All that was present in the founding. And so when the Constitution was put together, Franklin was asked, what have you wrought? Idea, what did you guys come up with out of this constitutional convention? He says, a republic, if you can keep it. And a republic is different than a democracy. And so the political thinkers of the time felt that they had created something that was too akin to a direct democracy. And it's always been through history, and a Scottish economist at the time said, you know, democracies always fail once people realize they can vote themselves gifts from the treasury. And if you go back to 1965, this is what we're doing. We're bankrupting our country in the name of giving people happiness, which they can't be given. They have to seek it themselves.
Could I interrupt for just a moment, though? You're not approaching my question at all. My question is, how, as a fellow Christian, do you reconcile your Christian principles with the support of proliferation of guns through the Second Amendment caucus, which you're a part of, is to try to get pro-gun laws through Congress more easily? And how do you justify supporting environmental regulation rollbacks when our first charge in the Garden of Eden was to take care of the creatures and take care of the planet and the environment? That's what I'm wondering. And how do you support the president, who we know is pretty much a compulsive, I'll just say liar, for want of a better word, and his policies and actions really, I don't know any other way to say it, that seem to be the opposite of what Jesus taught. I mean, how do you...
Okay, so let me take them in order. The Second Amendment cost. We're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, the right to life. You will not take my life from me. I am therefore endowed with the ability of self-defense. It is something that it's an inalienable right to defend yourself.
But biblically, how is it? Jesus said, take no thought for your life. Basically, longevity is not the first responsibility of a Christian. It's mercy, justice, peace, and those sorts of things.
Well, I appreciate the debate, but fundamentally, I mean, I'm not a pacifist. I wouldn't have been an Army Ranger if I was a pacifist.
Right.
Sorry.
I can understand it. But, well, yeah.
I understand. I understand. He gave a statement. That may not be the answer that we were looking
I didn't hear any answer, really. I'm sorry.
Hello, thank you for coming tonight. I'm a constituent of Clark County, and I'm not a paid protester. The Supreme Court decided abortions are legal in this country. No federal dollars are distributed to Planned Parenthood for abortion. President Trump wants to defund Planned Parenthood. This affects women who live in remote areas and have little or no access to care or services that Planned Parenthood provides, other than abortion, and may not have access to services that are available otherwise. How is it right for the defunding decision, which now becomes a moral issue, not a legal one, to be imposed on all women who need services, and why do you support them?
No organization in the world is entitled to $500 billion US for free. You're not entitled to $500 billion US. You're not entitled to a sole source contract from the United States government. Boeing isn't entitled to $500 billion, $500 million of US dollars, they earn it. And in the case of Planned Parenthood, there are a lot of folks that feel that there are better options available. So that is not a free market decision. If you want to go to Planned Parenthood and pay cash, no one's closing the doors of Planned Parenthood. You can go there and pay cash currently for the services they provide legally. And so if you want the federal government to continue to award this contract, then, vote for somebody that supports continuing to award the contract.
But the issue is centered around abortion for defunding Planned Parenthood, not for the other services that they do provide. And it is becoming a moral issue now instead of a legal issue, because abortion is legal. So let's take that off of the table. It is now becoming a moral issue, and it's going to affect all women who are there to use for other services. And I have heard that other health services would be available for women if Planned Parenthood wasn't there. Well, if you live in a remote area of West Virginia and Planned Parenthood is the only facility where you can go for a mammogram or any OB/GYN services, then you have nothing.
Yeah, so if you believe that if there's women there that need served, then there will be an option. And the reality is in Ohio, you have 20 community health centers to one Planned Parenthood facility. And the range of services they provide is far more comprehensive, and they don't do a single abortion, whether it's taxpayer funded, any privately funded, they don't do abortions, period. So there's no challenge there to say anything about abortion. Is if you really care about health care for women, instead of Planned Parenthood as an organization, you can provide the exact same services more abundantly, a wider range of them, 20-to-1 ratio in the state of Ohio by funding community health centers instead of Planned Parenthood.
Just a reminder, try to keep questions kind of short and sides. We have a lot of people on the sides.
All right, I'll try. Can you hear me? Thank you for your service to our country as an Army Ranger. And my question is, to me, it seems a little in conflict with some of the things that the president is currently doing. So I'd like to know, I guess, why you support him, and if you can help me understand why you would give your life or put your life on the line as an Army Ranger to defend and protect our country in war, yet you support a commander-in-chief who lies to us, who demonstrates no transparencies in his business affairs. He refuses to release his tax returns, which tell us what foreign entities, in addition to Russia, he has ties with, who he owes money to. The State Department is understaffed, all of which, I can tell that you're a little perturbed by this question, I'm sorry. Yeah, it is. I'm building up. My question is, how can you support all of those things which puts our national security at risk? Can we count on you to support the Presidential Transparency Act? Yay!
Okay, so how can I support a president who lied? Well, I don't support lying by any president. I didn't support Bill Clinton for his lies. I didn't support Barack Obama for his lies. And I don't support lies by anybody. They should be called out when they lie. Okay, so...
Well, it doesn't seem that the Congress is calling him out on his lies. They seem to push through everything that he wants to do.
Okay, so I'm not on active duty anymore. But what I do believe that we owe the men and women in uniform is a congressionally authorized military action. So what I'm committed to, and part of why I want to be there, is to see our Article I powers, where Congress takes the lead in declaring our wars. And we should be engaged there. We should have been engaged there when Bill Clinton was president, when George Bush was president, when Barack Obama was president, and now when Donald Trump is president. It's independent of who's in power. It's based on our Constitution. It is not an oath to support and defend the president because he's from my party or your party or some other party. It is to support and defend our Constitution.
And I contend that some of the things he's doing by lying and having no transparency, we don't know who he owes money to, you know, who can be influencing him, puts our country at risk, and I think that that's a congressman's job to defend that.
Right?
Can we count on you to support the Presidential Transparency Act?
Not likely.
All right, I'm Jessica Hollywood. I'm from Liberty Township, also one of your constituents, and my question revolves around Sylvia. I know her personally. She lives in Westchester. She also is in your district. I saw the video. I wasn't at your last event, but I saw the video. The guy was standing there, and all she did was walk past him, and he shoved her. Considering that we have a president who actually encouraged violence at his events, I want to know, do you encourage violence at your events?
No.
Okay, then I would encourage you to call the police department because she's trying to file charges and they are ignoring her. And it was obviously assault. You can watch the video yourself and see it. Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming to a truly open and public town hall. So I appreciate that. I was at the other town hall and I got kicked out. So my son did not have health insurance for 4 years until the ACA, when Medicaid was extended. He didn't have health insurance because he's in the service industry. And that industry pays minimum wage, and they keep their employees below a certain number of hours so that they don't have to pay health insurance. So many of the people that are on Medicaid are working, and they are the working poor. Under Trump Care, one of the major ways to make health insurance affordable is to bring back catastrophic insurance, which is basically no insurance at all, given that preventative health care is the #1 way to keep people healthy in our society. Can you explain why my son and millions of others in his situation are not deserving of affordable, decent health care that has essential benefits so that he can stay healthy and continue working?
Yay!
Okay, I don't know anything about your son, but as you described him, his skills are focused in an industry that doesn't have the kind of options that you want him to have for healthcare. So I don't believe that the taxpayers here are entitled to give that to him. I believe he's got the opportunity to go earn those health benefits. The majority of Americans earn their health benefits at work. They do. Nearly 200 million people do. There's only 11 to 30 on the most generous prospects. There's under 30 million people in the individual market. We also have a lot of people that are in Medicare, and we do have Medicaid. And Medicaid was originally launched under the Great Society to take care of the most disadvantaged people, widows and orphans, people with developmental disabilities. And the federal government reimburses states about 60% of the expenses they have for there. When President Obama launched his expansion program, in order to cover folks, as you described your son, who came into this category of Medicaid expansion, they said, we're going to reimburse you at 9-1. It provided a perverse incentive for states to grow that population. In Ohio, it's over 700,000. 24% of the people, so your son's an outlier, he's one of only 24% of the people that are able-bodied adults who work and get Medicaid dollars. So if you're an able-bodied adult who works and get Medicaid, you're in that population. 3/4 of the people that get those dollars do not work, despite being able-bodied adults. And so when we have a social safety net, people support having one broadly across the country, but when you're an able-bodied adult, they expect you to get out of it. In your son's case, he's out of it. Well, what about prescribing what benefits he shall have? If he doesn't want a catastrophic care plan, then don't buy a catastrophic care plan. If you don't want a flip phone, don't buy a flip phone.
Oh my gosh, stop doing that.
I'm sorry, healthcare is much different than a cell phone, and I'm tired of people using cell phone analogies with healthcare.
Congressman Davidson, thanks so much. My name is Martin Fish. I'm a constituent from Westchester. Thank you for being here. We may disagree on many things, but I think that you and I and everybody here loves our country and loves our democracy. And I think that, or at least I expect that we would agree, that much of what underpins our democracy is public faith in that democracy and in the system itself. And I believe that right now we're in a situation because of allegations of interference in our previous election by Russia, that public faith in that process is being eroded. And I don't think this is a partisan issue. I think this is about all of us coming together and agreeing that we need to say to foreign countries that we will stand together and we will investigate clearly and without any partisanship what is going on from outside of our country. And so I'm asking whether you would support an independent special prosecutor to investigate what happened in our election so that we can take partisanship out of it and restore our faith in our government and our democracy.
Yeah, so here's what I support. So I agree with you that we should unite as a country against outside influence in our governing process. And I agree that there are facts that show that outside governments have attempted to interfere with our process, but not in the way that some have alleged. They've willfully used words like hack our election, when people know that our voting machines aren't connected to the internet.
Respectfully, this isn't about voting machines. It's about specific interference in a variety of ways. We need to investigate how it's happened. I'm not looking to overturn an election. I'm looking to send a message to the world that we will stand together against foreign powers that are trying to corrupt our democracy.
Yeah, so, as I said at the last town hall on this question, Clint Watts is one of my classmates. He's a guy that Democrats love right now, and many Republicans hate, because he's pointing out the facts that Russia has used, cyber attacks and done spoofs with social media accounts to drive up news, whether it's accurate news, inaccurate news, fake news, completely fabricated, or fake news that's got an element of truth in it. And these are facts. These are facts that I accept that have happened, but they're also things that predate this election cycle.
Certainly. That is why it's so important for us to say we will thoroughly and without partisanship investigate these allegations. So would you support an independent investigation?
No, I support letting the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee do their work. So I support that, and when they've reached their conclusion, if at the end of their conclusion, their recommendation is that, then I would look at the facts that led them to draw that conclusion. Right now, I think that we have the body that's closest to the people, and if the people are truly going to be united, then they should unite behind the people's House and the people's Senate and expect that we do our duty.
Thank you for your answer, but I do think it's important that we do this independently and without partisanship. Thank you.
So if Jeff Sessions appointed an independent guy of his choosing, that would be independent? So that's the reality. You can't get an independent person that everyone's going to respect. It has to be somebody that is truly the body. You have the House and the Senate. Let them do their job, and I think they will.
The Congressman does have a family function that he's going to be going to soon, so we may be able to take one or two more questions. Make sure you get a white paper if you haven't done that so far, and then we will have some audience participation questions after that. So we'll try try to keep it shorter, we might be able to get a little bit more.
Mr. Davidson, thank you for being here. My name is Lori Staffen. I'm one of your constituents from Clark County. There have been bills introduced in Congress to eliminate the EPA, decrease funding for environmental protection of the Great Lakes, and weaken the Endangered Species Act. What will you do to make sure that our environment and our health are protected?
Yeah, so good question. Thanks for coming out tonight. The environment is something, look, despite all the narratives, I've never met anybody that doesn't like clean air and clean water. All right. I always use the way to illustrate, there's a lot of International's a big company here, Navistar in our area, right? So we like that there's diesel trucks made right here in Clark County. But we generally, because we care about the environment, we want there to be some standard for those diesel engines. So I'm not a guy that says there should be no regulation, despite political cartoons to the contrary. I've never met any Republicans that favor no regulation of the environment. But maybe you can introduce them to me, I don't know. But if you look locally, right here in our county, in Clark County, you've got Republicans and Democrats united completely, and we've done everything we can to support them on Tremont. So they're united. It's not a partisan issue. It's we want to protect our aquifer issue, and we're not confident the EPA is doing everything they can to do that. So that's the way where we help and do it. But fundamentally, when you say the EPA goes about the way they do their business in a way that I think is willfully partisan. And it's done this to create a wedge issue for political purposes rather than to solve the problem. And one of the biggest examples of that to me is the way they do diesel engines. The reg for diesel engines is 4,000 pages long. It's longer than it takes to make the diesel engine. You could create a simple standard that says the diesel engines that comply meet this test and have a test. It wouldn't take 4,000 pages to describe it. And so I think that we should have common sense regulation like that is not indifferent to the environment, but also isn't indifferent to the cost of compliance. Because if it's easier to do, and still, we want cleaner diesel engines, but we want them to be able to make these trucks, and we want them to be able to do it here in Clark County instead of somewhere else. So that's an example of the balance that I think is at play there. With respect to the Great Lakes, I think it's a good question. That is not a state of Ohio issue. It's not Ohio's responsibility to clean up all the Great Lakes or even all of Great Lake Erie. That is a federal issue, and I think that we should work to support federal funding for the Great Lakes Initiative.
Thank you. Ready? Again, thank you for the town hall, and thank you for serving our country. My name is Meredith Glenn. I'm from Westchester. I'm a constituent. Quick question. I don't know much about the Freedom Caucus. I would like to know what their platform is, and I would like to know why you are a member of the Freedom Caucus.
Good question. So in 2015, when John Boehner was the Speaker of the House, if you asked me the difference between the Freedom Caucus and the Steel Caucus, I'd have told you one deals with steel and the other does something with freedom. All right? And I'm going to ask a similar question. All right? So when you get there, you go, well, what is it? What is this difference? So there's caucuses all through Congress, and they generally are people that get behind a cause. In the case here, the Freedom Caucus came to unite around a cause in Republican circles. So what is their platform? Well, their platform is the Republican platform. They're all Republicans. And so the way that the media describes them is generally, far right. The reality is most of us are conservative, but most of us are conservative with a particular bent that is less authoritarian and more libertarian. So if you look left and right, generally people are right of center politically, but also instead of being authoritarian, they're more libertarian in the sense that smaller government, freedom, free markets. And when I looked at it, well, gee, there's roughly 40 people. I went to a couple meetings and I listened to probably the most intense debate about policy. These are people that will read the bills, people that will that share a common set of beliefs but might disagree on policy. And they have real debate. And so that's something that you would think happens, and you'd think it happens on the floor of the House, but generally it doesn't happen that way. And so these guys meet regularly and go deep on given issues. You can count on multiple people having a perspective on a bill. And if you look at healthcare, for example, which made the caucus more public lately, over half of the Freedom Caucus is already yes on the original speaker's bill. So there was a dialogue between really conservatives and moderates. And so why have people painted the caucus in this way? Well, because they're generally right of center. There's a commonality among all other members of Congress as painting them as the problem so that they can shift the debate to the left, which is the goal of virtually everyone else in Congress. Why am I a member of the Freedom Caucus? Because I think they're effective and they stand for the Republican Party platform. So you can't find an issue that the Freedom Caucus supports that is out of touch with what they campaigned on. And that's not common in Congress. Now, as to whether they're effective or not, I think that they have some challenges. So you have people that go rush to the media across Congress, and sometimes they speak as if they're speaking for everyone that's associated with it. And that's one of the problems of associating with any group, including Republicans. So, for example, I had a question at the last town hall: why do you always vote party line? Well, apparently you haven't read my record, because I don't always vote party line. There are sometimes I disagree with our party. And one of them was on the FCC rule. So whenever you paint someone with that, it's like any stereotype. What I found in the Freedom Caucus, there's two official rules. You have to be willing to say yes, and you have to be willing to say no. And people say, well, it's easy to say no in Congress. You just have to find a way to say yes. And I disagree. It's actually very easy to say yes on Capitol Hill. Go along, get along. Life's easy in D.C. Fundraising's easier. Everything else is easier about political life. The whip team's happier with you. It's no when you actually get improvements to the bill. And when you look at something that more moderate members and more conservative members agreed on with respect to health care, we agreed that this bill didn't do what we promised families. And we had different reasons why we felt that way, but fundamentally, one of the common denominators is you have to lower costs. And so one of the best things about this bill that has come in, one is flexibility for states. If you look at our state, for example, Medicaid can be used to treat drug addiction at our governor's discretion in a way where a different state that didn't have as big a problem. That's because people were willing to say no. There's work requirements. That's added because people were willing to say no. And what is now in the bill is an amendment to it that creates a back-end risk-sharing pool. So healthcare is different than cell phones or car insurance in the sense that, if you get 8 DUIs, we're okay if no one will sell you car insurance. But if you get cancer, we're not really okay if nobody will take care of you. So, but that's really a social safety net issue more than anything. So what I think people were surprised to learn is conservatives and more moderate members agreed that this is something that can work in a social safety net setting, because conservatives actually do care that that net is there, and they care that people have coverage. But the best way for it, in a lot of people's opinion, isn't to fight over who picks up the tab, it's to make it affordable to buy. So when you take that risk sharing out, you take the cancer patient, for example, and put them in a risk sharing pool, they can pick that up through Medicaid dollars now in the back end, and that isn't going to affect premiums. So people's premiums will be lower. These are in the weeds details, and I'm kind of going more into the weeds than a lot of people want to listen to. A lot of you guys have already tuned out, all right, on that. Okay, but these are the kinds of things that if you don't have a group of colleagues that will go deep into those bills, you don't go deep into those bills. You just do what you're told.
So my hope will be that you will expand that debate among your colleagues to include everybody.
Well, if the Freedom Caucus were running leadership, they would, but they're not going to win the leadership vote.
I understand that you likes and likes, I get that, but every once in a while we have to open up just like we do in a town hall, and we have to grind it out. And I really do want our Congress and our Senate to start grinding things out and actually move this country forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think everyone I know would agree with that sentiment. So, one more question.
last but not the least, thank you, Representative Davidson, for your military service, for being here, and also for being fashionably late. Just a little humor. Just a little humor. What has concerned me is the policies that are being contemplated by Washington adversely affect millions of Americans. For example, you mentioned Medicaid. According to Governor Kasich, 700,000 Ohioans, if some of the things discussed happens, will be out of of healthcare. So my question to you, sir, is what is your vision for an equitable healthcare system in these great United States, especially when the Congress itself has voted itself one of the best healthcare plans in the whole wide world? Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think it's a good one. So one is Congress actually buys their health insurance through an Obamacare exchange. I have a high deductible health savings account plan with $6,000 out-of-pockets purchased from United Healthcare. So if you have a United HSA at work, roughly we have the same plan. Okay, and it's bought on a DC HealthLink Obamacare exchange. It's a good plan. It's fundamentally the same plan I had with Anthem here in Ohio, but it costs like $400 more a month. But other than that, it's the same basic thing. So what's my vision? Well, my vision isn't what we're voting on, all right? And unfortunately, that's kind of true of this legislation. Even the people that have been yes for months now on the healthcare bill don't really like the bill. And part of it is the rules of the Senate. You have to get 60 votes. So when Obamacare was passed, they had 60 votes in the Senate. And to agree to vote, you got to have 60 votes. So the path that's been pursued is something far less than what's been promised, inherently because you only get 52 Republican votes. And Democrats have said they're not participating because it's blasphemy to touch Obamacare. They literally will not touch Obamacare. And so you can't have it. Well, okay, so we have 50. Yeah, so you could do that. You could do that. But the reality is, even the most conservative members of the Senate don't favor doing that. I mean, so you talk to Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, they don't really favor the nuclear option for standard legislation. And I think that it would be sad if we had to go down that path. But fundamentally, if you can't change anything, and the reality is if Democrats were in, they would change things about Obamacare. They would change things about Dodd-Frank. But if Republicans touch it, then it's not okay. The reality is they know that it's got some structural problems. They would fix them differently. But so for me, I think what's highlighted is what's really important is that you get a federalism solution that lets states be different, that there's not a one-size-fits-all plan from Washington, D.C. And that's what Obamacare did. It created this is how we're going to run healthcare in America approach. And our country is just too big and diverse. And you see things where we have broad consensus in America on a number of issues. We clearly don't have that on healthcare. So I really think that it's fundamentally wrong for one partisan side or the other to try to cram this solution down on the rest of America, because there isn't a consensus on it. I do think there's a consensus on a couple things, and I believe that we should fix our Constitution so that we have an amendment that addresses health care. And if we would have that debate, we could get to the heart of the problem, which is, I think that most Americans accept some sort of social safety net, but I believe in a free market. And lots of people don't believe in a free market. They want health care as if it were an endowed by your creator to health care.
Yes, exactly.
We weren't endowed by our creator with health care. We were not endowed, we were endowed with life. All right, and so you're not entitled to someone else's stuff. And so in healthcare, for example, I think we have to protect a free market.
Can I ask my question? It has to do with a free market.
I'll take this last question, and then we do really want to follow up, and I'm happy to try to do that as best we can. So thank you all for being out here. Look for your last question.
Okay. I'm Cynthia Dunlevy, and I am from Clark County, too. I'm one of your constituents. And my question is, and you gave me a good segue into it, in a free, open, competitive market, there would be a government health care option that would provide your constituents with greater freedom to choose, or in essence, vote with our economic dollars, what option we, your constituents, want to fund. Will you commit for your constituents tonight to working to ensure that we have a true, free, competitive market by ensuring that any revisions to the Affordable Care Act includes a government option that we, your constituents, can choose what we want?
No, I don't believe the federal government should operate a health insurance company. No, thank you.
But you believe in a free and open and competitive market.
I believe in a free and open competitive market for gasoline, but we don't have a federal gas station.
I need gasoline to live.
Not yet. But gas isn't the same as
We don't have a
healthcare.
federal car company. It didn't work out that way. I mean, no. We don't need to operate a federally
Well,
funded.
in a free and open
We don't have a
and
federally funded-
competitive market, the free hand of the market would decide.
Okay, so, so I think I'm sorry that we didn't get all the questions, but I will say that the congressman was not late tonight. He was actually taken by the media to ask questions. So I would just like to say, thank the congressman for coming. I just want to see. I just asked, are we appreciative of him coming tonight? And then I just have one audience participation question. If the election was held today for his seat, would you vote for him? Okay, so he's going to give some closing remarks. And then he really has to go. He has some family, so let's give him the respect to let him leave as soon as he kind of gets done with that question, with his following statements.
Hey, thanks for being out here. I know you guys have lots of things to do, and I really appreciate you hearing me out. So thanks for coming out. I respect that some of you guys are probably never going to vote for me, and some of you may never actually vote Republican, and that's okay. You know, the founders, when they were there, they had a debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. You know, it was a very strong debate. It took years to ratify our Constitution. I talked about Ben Franklin and the Constitutional Convention. George Washington sat in a chair that had a depiction of his sun on the back of the chair of the rising sun. People know it. People didn't know. Ben Franklin walked up to George Washington at the end of the convention, and he said to him, you know, I looked at the sun on that chair the whole time we were here at this convention, and I wondered whether it was a rising sun or a setting sun. And I know now that what we've done here shows that it's a rising sun on a great nation. I really hope that we don't start believing that we are looking at the setting sun on our nation. All right? It looks from the rhetoric that's out here today that people are on the verge of civil war. They're ready to hate their neighbor instead of love their neighbor. They're ready to believe the worst about somebody just because they don't agree with their political position. They're ready to believe that they hate people because they're not from America just because they want them to come here legally. They're ready to believe that people campaign for office to support and defend a president or a party instead of our Constitution. So I ask you to turn back to our founding documents, turn back to the things that have always made our country great. I appreciate you guys doing that in a small way by being out here and engaging in a pretty civic discourse tonight. Thanks for hosting a good event. Thank you all. Thank you to our law enforcement folks that came out. Appreciate you guys. And I look forward to seeing you around. We will have an event in Butler County again soon. We've had events down there before, so thank you all that traveled, I think the furthest. And then I'm at an event in Mercer County on Friday night. So I've got an event in Oxford tomorrow. I've got events Thursday, generally in Butler, and then I've got Friday in Mercer. So thanks a lot.
Thank you guys for coming out. Questions not answered, please get a white paper in the back and give it to one of us, and we will make sure we get it to the staff.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Well, thank you for doing your job and being in here.
Year before,